I am reading as voraciously as is practically possible about what is happening in Gaza at the moment, trying to add even little bits of understanding to my very muddled thinking about what is happening, and more importantly, what needs to happen. We know what is happening. We sort of have a sense of what hysterical drivers there have been of what is happening, but as I've been saying now for a couple of weeks, I'm trying to find a way off this highway of hell. What is that off ramp? What needs to happen for that off ramp to be constructed? Who are the builders? This. And I read with enormous interest Messianism. Is that how you say it? And Madness, an intimate hell ride through end times in the Holy Land, written by Daily Maverick writer Kevin Bloom, who is Jewish, and who starts his article by looking back to July 1992 in Jerusalem, where he was in the olive green uniform of the Israel Defense Forces, an M16 assault rifle in the grip of my willing hands. And he was there because he had volunteered to undergo 3 months of basic training given by the IDF at the level received by regular conscripts in the tank units. And he would have, if his family had not persuaded him otherwise, to have followed that with enlisting in one of the special forces of the Israeli Defense Force, but maybe the Parabats. And Kevin is with us now. Kevin, good afternoon.
John, hi. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I mean, as you write, standing there with this M16 in your hands in these olive green uniforms, about to break through a door, IDF-controlled back entrance to the Muslim quarter of Old Jerusalem, you didn't think about it. It seemed to be absolutely the right thing to be doing.
Well, definitely at the time, John. Yuval Noah Harari talks. He's been talking about it now, that we have a situation here where you've got two sides who are only seeing one side. And as a young, idealistic 19-year-old who had grandparents that were very close to the Holocaust and parents that spoke about it constantly, and I went to a private Jewish day school where the history of exile and slaughter of the Jewish people is very much part of the curriculum. And I was a young idealist, and I found the IDF to be an avenue for that, because the shame of exile and slaughter on that scale, and that includes, the Holocaust as well, is it's severely lessened when you're in the olive green uniform of the IDF and you have an M16 in your hand. And as a 18 or a 19-year-old, the need to dehumanize the other, because it just makes your world a lot simpler, is pretty much what's indoctrinated in you. I came back to South Africa. My father knew that I would wind up in the occupied territories during the First Intifada. An over-equipped young idealist now against the rock-throwing kids of the First Intifada. And that would set me on a certain course in life. But then I arrived back at Wits University in 1993, and I write about in the piece how I became very good friends with the head of the heads of the ANC Youth League branch for Naledi in Soweto in 93. And it took me a couple of months in 93 to realize that there was a justifiable alliance between the Palestinian cause and the cause of the ANC. But then what that precipitated was a series of mental health crises, because I had a bunch of incompatible facts in my head. And the only way I could get them into place again was through a mental collapse. So there was a psychic breakdown 30 years ago. And that's how I opened the piece. And essentially what I'm saying with that is that what we're looking at here, the horrors we're looking at, and our confusion is around a range of incompatible facts and incomplete stories, and stories that dehumanize the other. So essentially what I've tried to do with this piece is take a bit of the heat out of the situation, at least for our readers in South Africa, because the heat is being piled on both sides, and it does seem like an intractable situation.
So, and I want people who are listening to us now who are in any way intrigued by what you've been saying, I want them to go and read the article in its fullness, because inevitably in the space of a 10-minute radio interview, I'm only going to touch the surface of what you write. But if I can pick up on that, those incomplete stories and those confusing, incompatible facts, how are you, with your history, making sense of those? How are you navigating an attempt to better understand what is happening there and what might be, seems extremely unlikely at the moment, but what might be a way forward that introduces compatibility and reduces confusion?
Sure. So I'm looking at this through the lens of a very tragic moment in the history of Israel-Palestine, and that was the murder, the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin by a Messianic Jewish zealot by the name of Yigal Amir in November of 1994. And with Rabin had died any hope for lasting peace. Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres as well had seen what was coming. And before them, so some of the greatest Jewish minds to have come out of Holocaust Europe, including Martin Buber and Hannah Arendt and Albert Einstein, had seen. And it's not as if they were saying the Jews don't need a homeland. I mean, after the Holocaust, I don't think anyone could argue with the rights of the Jews to the state of their own. Anti-Semitism is very real and has been for thousands of years. But what was foreseen by those great thinkers, and then by Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin, was a situation as horrific as the one that we are seeing now. So the Oslo Accords had its problems, but those problems could have been ironed out between Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin. There was all the will to do that. There was a very famous anti-peace protest in Jerusalem in October of 94, a couple of weeks before Rabin got assassinated. And at that protest, Netanyahu at the time, who was the head of the opposition Likud party, they were the opposition at the time, incited the crowd and basically saying that Jerusalem's the eternal capital of the Jewish people and that Arafat is a murderer. 2 weeks later, Rabin gets murdered. Now, there was a young man by the name of, he was a young man at the time by the name of Itamar Ben-Gvir. And he was head of a youth movement of a party known as Kach. And this was a right-wing religious rabbi. Now Israeli politics is very difficult, but the religious Zionists are very different from the ultra-Orthodox, who don't believe that the state of Israel has a right to exist because the Messiah hasn't come. The religious Zionists push for an active actualization of the ancient prophecies around the fact that the land of Israel has been given to the Jews eternally only by the Jewish God. And Itamar Ben-Gvir was one of these young fanatics, zealots. And the first time he was on TV was, again, it was around the time of this anti-peace protest in Jerusalem, and he was holding a Cadillac hood ornament from Yitzhak Rabin's car in his hand. And he said, smiling to the camera, "We got to his car and we'll get to him too." Itamar Ben-Gvir was central in the most right-wing coalition government that returned Netanyahu to power in November last year, and is now the national security minister, and has been behind what's been unprecedented in Israel this year, which has been violent Jewish settler incursions into the West Bank, backed up by the IDF. Now there's a lot of anger on the ground in Israel against the likes of Ben Gvir. When he goes into hospitals or he goes to funerals, he gets shouted out, because it seems the reason of the security breach by Hamas on October the 7th was that the Israeli army, most of the Israeli army were in the West Bank guarding the settlers because of what was flaring up there. But that's as interesting as that might be, and as true as that might be, that's to miss the point that Netanyahu, his ticket, has been the incitement of the Israeli right. And the Oslo Accords was the best chance at a negotiated settlement. And it came at a time when you've got South Africa sorting out its problems, you've got the fall of the Berlin Wall. Francis Fukuyama is talking about the end of history. I mean, that all turns out to be very wrong, but it's a deeply missed opportunity, and so we have to get back there. Now at the same time, when you go and you look at Hamas's charter, when you look at what they're actually saying in their covenant, that was put together and published in 1998, they're calling for genocide against the Jews. It's a jihad and it's a holy war. So you've got ascendant ideologies on both sides that have this messianic, biblical narrative at the bottom. And it's remarkable and even crazy to say, but you're seeing these prophecies being sort of actualized on the ground in real time. And you have elements on both sides that want that to happen. And the only way we're going to get to any sort of sanity here is if the rational secular middle, the majority on both sides still, although both sides are getting radicalized every day, but the majority on both sides, and I have very close family in Israel, and I have close Palestinian friends who and this is the tragedy, it's very hard to have those conversations. It's very hard for a Jew and a Palestinian to have a conversation. And so the movements in Israel, the real peace movements, the tragedy is that they're falling away. But that space has to reopen because Hamas needs to go and Netanyahu and Ben Gvir need to go.
Thank you very, very much to senior investigative journalist at Daily Maverick, Kevin Bloom. There's more in his piece which I urge you to read.